Hello, I am Rabbi Ethan Rosenberg, and today I need to share with you a truth that few have the courage to teach. A revelation that might sound contradictory at first, but one that will be liberating once you fully comprehend its profound meaning. Comment below with your financial situation to support prosperity and subscribe to my channel. I count on your help to spread the message of Jewish wealth. During my 40 years of studying and teaching the principles of prosperity based on ancient Jewish wisdom, I discovered that there is a specific, almost contradictory way to build true wealth, contrary to the values society teaches us. And this method has been quietly practiced by Jewish communities for centuries, generating fortunes while most people remain in a constant financial struggle, especially those who are over 45 and discover that decades of doing good have left them in a precarious situation. This is not a cruel or selfish approach, but rather a deep understanding that there is a sacred order to generosity and wealth building which, when inverted, destroys both the giver and the receiver, and that millions of kind-hearted people are financially broken precisely because they never learned this fundamental distinction between being intelligently good versus being self-destructively good. I want you to understand something very important right now. If you are over 45 and feel that the more you help others, the more your own financial situation deteriorates, you are not alone. You are not weak. You have not failed as a person. You have simply been misguided by a culture that confuses true generosity with destructive self-sacrifice. The problem that plagues most people over 45 is precisely this. They were taught that being generous, helpful, and selfless are absolute virtues, without understanding that there is an ancient wisdom about when, how, and to whom to exercise these qualities. The result is that they reach maturity with debts accumulated from lending money to relatives who never paid it back, with savings depleted from helping adult children who became dependent, with health compromised by overwork driven by the constant need to take care of everyone around them, and with shattered self-esteem from feeling they have failed financially despite having been good people their whole lives. Let me tell you about Sharon, a 52-year-old retired teacher I met 2 years ago when she sought my teachings in total desperation. Sharon perfectly exemplifies this situation. Throughout her professional life, she lent money to colleagues in difficulty, helped pay for 2 nephews' college tuition, contributed to a friend's medical treatment, and could never say no when someone asked for financial help. The result is that today, at 52, she lives on less than $1,000 a month from her pension, has no emergency fund, lives with her sister out of necessity, and feels a deep bitterness upon realizing that none of the people she helped show gratitude or offer support in return. When Sharon came to me, she cried, and her voice trembled as she asked why she was being punished this way, why her kindness had brought her so much misery, after always being a good person and always helping those in need. Robert, a 49-year-old owner of a construction business who also came to my teachings at a moment of desperation, experienced a similar situation. He built his business always prioritizing being fair with suppliers, employees, and clients, frequently accepting late payments, reducing his margins to not hurt anyone, and lending equipment without charging, until a series of defaults and excessive generosity led his company to bankruptcy, leaving him at 49 having to start over as an employee, carrying debt and the bitter feeling of having been too good for his own good. Robert told me with tears in his eyes how he had always tried to do the right thing, always put the well-being of others before his own, but he wondered where it had led him and how his kindness could have destroyed him. The cruel irony is that precisely those who have strived the most to help others are the ones who suffer most in their own financial lives, creating a vicious cycle where genuine kindness becomes a source of personal misery, while those who have learned to apply sacred boundaries prosper and, paradoxically, are in a much better position to truly help when needed. This is the first truth I need to reveal today. There is a fundamental difference between being a kind person who prospers versus being a kind person who self-destructs, and only the former has the real capacity to transform the world around them in a sustainable and lasting way. During my years of teaching, I have discovered that people like you have been victims of a deeply flawed cultural programming that has romanticized the idea of financial self-sacrifice as the highest virtue, creating a generation of kind but broken people who feel guilty for prioritizing their own stability, when in fact, this prioritization is the mandatory first step to being able to contribute meaningfully to the world. In the sacred texts of the Jewish tradition, there is a hidden wisdom about this that has remained concealed for centuries, not because of a deliberate secret, but because our society has created a romantic narrative about personal sacrifice that is harming millions of good people like you. The Jewish concept of chesed is often misunderstood by the Western world, being translated simply as kindness or charity, when in fact it represents a complex system of reciprocal responsibility where true help strengthens both parties, never creating dependency or harm to the one offering support. This concept works in harmony with the principle of tikkun olam, which means to repair the world, but which requires each person to first establish their own solid foundation before expanding their contribution, because a financially unstable person cannot generate a sustainable positive impact. Tzedakah, unlike traditional Christian charity, is not just about giving to the needy, but about creating a just system where each person maintains their dignity and ability to contribute. Maimonides, one of the greatest Jewish sages who lived almost 1,000 years ago, established 8 levels of tzedakah, where the highest is not giving a handout, but helping someone become self-sufficient, while the lowest is giving reluctantly or in a way that humiliates the recipient. But there is an even lower level that Maimonides mentions discreetly. Giving more than one can sustain, because this will eventually prevent future opportunities to help and will create resentment in the heart of the giver. I want you to reflect deeply on this spiritual truth that will transform your life. My cup must be full first, so that the overflow can nourish other plants. This is not a selfish metaphor or a justification for greed. It is a fundamental spiritual law that governs all of creation. The Eternal does not want your self-destructive sacrifice. He wants your order, your wisdom, your ability to prosper sustainably so that you can be a lasting blessing instead of a spring that quickly runs dry. The hidden rule that I will reveal to you throughout this teaching is that there is a sacred sequence to prosperity that can be summarized in the principle, my cup first, then the overflow, meaning that a person can only truly help others when they have established their own financial security, their own peace of mind, and their own ability to generate abundance. Trying to help from a place of personal scarcity not only fails to help effectively, but also perpetuates the cycle of poverty for everyone involved. This rule is often unknown because modern society, especially Western Christian culture, has romanticized the idea of financial self-sacrifice as a virtue, creating a generation of kind but broken people who feel guilty for prioritizing their own stability, when in fact this prioritization is the mandatory first step to being able to contribute meaningfully to the world. I have observed over decades of teaching that there is a very specific pattern among those who manage to transform their financial situation after 45. They learn to distinguish between helping intelligently versus helping emotionally, and they discover that helping intelligently is infinitely more effective for both the giver and the receiver. When Sharon began to apply the principles I am sharing with you, the first thing she had to confront was her own mental programming that associated personal prosperity with selfishness, a deeply rooted belief that had been reinforced by years of praise for being the one who always helps, the generous one in the family, the one with the big heart. I explained to Sharon that these compliments, though well-intentioned, had become a psychological prison that prevented her from prospering because her identity was completely tied to the role of providing for others, leaving zero mental and emotional space to build her own abundance. The concept of Shabbat also carries a profound financial wisdom that our culture has completely lost, representing the importance of establishing sacred periods of pause and reflection, where a person disconnects from the constant struggle for money to assess whether they are building wealth sustainably or just running on an endless treadmill that will leave them exhausted and poor. I taught Sharon to implement a weekly financial Shabbat, an 8-hour period where she dedicated herself exclusively to evaluating her financial situation, planning investments, and studying income opportunities without guilt or interruptions, establishing that prosperity also requires dedicated time and focus, not just hard work without direction. During this process, Sharon discovered something surprising. By mapping out all the loans she had made in the last 5 years, she realized she had involuntarily donated over $15,000, an amount that today would be enough to secure her financial independence with enough left over for true, planned donations. But the most shocking discovery was that of the 15 loans she had made, only 2 were paid back in full, and even those 2 were paid with significant delays and only after much insistence on her part. The other 13 loans simply vanished, with the beneficiaries claiming they had forgotten, that they considered it a gift, or simply avoiding contact with her. Robert went through a similar discovery when he applied the financial leak audit exercise I developed to identify all the ways a person is losing money through misapplied kindness, from unpaid loans to below-market prices for not wanting to hurt clients, to expenses on expensive gifts for people who show no gratitude. Robert discovered that in the last 3 years, he had lost approximately $50,000 in services provided at excessive discounts or not charged for, equipment lent that never returned, and materials provided on the house for clients claiming temporary financial difficulties. But here is the deepest insight I want to share with you. Both Sharon and Robert discovered that the people who took advantage of their generosity had an almost supernatural radar for identifying who is too kind to say no, who feels guilty when setting boundaries, who was taught from childhood that questioning requests for help is a sign of a hard heart or a lack of love for others. It is as if these people have an infallible instinct to detect those who will sacrifice their own security to avoid appearing insensitive, and this discovery was simultaneously liberating and disturbing for both of them. The first practical principle I applied with them was the establishment of sacred boundaries, where a person learns to say no to requests for loans without a contract, to business opportunities that drain their energy without proportional return, and to relationships that consume their resources without offering reciprocity, not out of selfishness, but out of an understanding that preserving one's ability to generate wealth is a spiritual responsibility. I taught Sharon a specific script to respond to loan requests. I care about you deeply, and that's exactly why I can't make informal loans anymore, because it has harmed our relationship in the past. But I can help you find other solutions for your situation. For Robert, we developed the price recalibration technique that teaches professionals and small business owners to adjust their rates to reflect the true value delivered, overcoming the mental programming of charging low to help, including techniques to communicate price increases in a way the client understands and accepts. Because when a person charges appropriately for their work, they are able to make real donations instead of living in a forced donation disguised as a low price. Robert learned to say, "My prices reflect the quality and care I put into every job, and this allows me to offer you the best possible service, as well as enabling me to keep my business running sustainably." The implementation of the separate abundance account was transformational for both, establishing that each month they should deposit a fixed amount, even a small one, into a specific account representing their own prosperity, and this amount could never be touched to help others, creating a powerful psychological ritual where the person trains the mental muscle of prioritizing their own wealth building. Sharon started by depositing only $50 a month, but the symbolic act of setting that money aside for herself was psychologically revolutionary, because for the first time in decades, she was officially prioritizing her own prosperity. Robert applied the same principle in his business, creating a specific account where he deposited 15% of every payment received, money that was exclusively for reinvestment in the business or for his personal reserve, never for loans or favors. This simple change began to fundamentally alter his relationship with money, shifting from a mindset of constant scarcity to one of planned abundance. Both discovered that the simple act of setting aside money for themselves created a sense of security and dignity they had lost years ago. But the most profound transformation came when we implemented the renegotiation of outstanding loans, following a specific script where the person learns to approach debtors firmly but respectfully, setting clear deadlines and consequences for non-payment, transforming relationships based on favors into relationships based on contracts, which paradoxically improves the relationship and increases the likelihood of receiving payment. Sharon discovered that when she approached her debtors with clarity and firmness, some actually organized themselves to pay, others admitted they couldn't but proposed alternatives, and only a minority reacted with hostility, revealing that these latter had never been true friends from the start. Robert had a similar experience. When he started requiring simple contracts even for small jobs and established clear payment policies, he discovered that serious clients respected these conditions and even thanked him for the transparency, while those who had been taking advantage of his kindness naturally sought other suppliers, automatically improving the quality of his client base. What both learned is that setting clear boundaries doesn't push away good people. It only pushes away those who were benefiting from the lack of boundaries. This discovery leads us to the heart of Jewish wisdom on prosperity, which is founded on the principle that the Eternal wants us to be prosperous enough to help consistently over decades, wise enough to teach principles instead of just giving money, strong enough to say no when necessary without feeling guilty, and balanced enough to be a lasting blessing instead of a spring that quickly runs dry. When I began teaching this concept to people like you, I noticed a very strong initial resistance, because we have been programmed to believe that thinking of our own prosperity first is selfishness, when in fact it is spiritual responsibility. Let me tell you about Daniel, a 51-year-old accountant, who came to my teachings a year ago in a state of total exhaustion, working 16 hours a day because he couldn't charge appropriately for his services, always justifying low prices with phrases like, "It's to help. They can't afford to pay more. At least I'm making a difference in their lives." Daniel discovered through the mapping exercise that he was working practically for free for 70% of his clients, earning less than a regular employee despite having 30 years of experience and enormous responsibilities. More seriously, Daniel was developing heart problems due to the stress of overworking for inadequate pay, jeopardizing not only his financial stability, but his very life. When I applied the concept of sacred value with Daniel, explaining that charging appropriately for his work is not greed, but a recognition of the value the Eternal placed in his skills, something fundamental shifted in his perception. I told Daniel, when you charge less than your worth, you are disrespecting not only yourself, but the gift the Eternal has given you, and you are teaching others that they can devalue that gift too. Daniel cried at that moment, because he realized that his humility regarding prices was actually a form of self-sabotage disguised as virtue. The implementation of the 40-day challenge for financial re-education with Daniel was transformational, proposing a gradual change, where for 40 consecutive days he practiced small acts of prioritizing his own prosperity, from denying a request for an excessive discount to researching opportunities to increase his income through more specialized services. Each day, Daniel had to make a conscious choice that prioritized his prosperity, creating a new mental identity where being prosperous was not selfishness, but responsibility, not only to himself, but to all those who truly depended on his stability. During these 40 days, Daniel applied techniques to recover financial self-esteem, which include daily rituals of affirming his right to be prosperous, exercises to forgive past financial mistakes, and methods to visualize the successful future version of himself. Because a person who feels unworthy of wealth will unconsciously sabotage any financial progress. I taught Daniel to repeat daily, "My prosperity is a blessing to the world. Wealth achieved with integrity multiplies the good I can do," creating a mental reframe where seeking prosperity became an act of serving others more effectively. Lucy, a 53-year-old piano teacher I met through a referral, was in a similar situation. She gave private lessons, charging absurdly low rates because music should be accessible to everyone, with the result that she worked 7 days a week, saw students at impossible hours, and still couldn't pay her own basic bills. When Lucy applied the price recalibration technique I developed, discovering that students who pay appropriately are more committed and respectful, she experienced a transformation that went beyond the financial. For the first time in years, Lucy felt respected and valued as a professional. Lucy's initial resistance was intense. How can I deny music to a child because of money? I explained to her the concept of intelligent tzedakah. When you charge fair prices, you can consciously choose to offer true scholarships to underprivileged children instead of charging everyone a little and not being able to help anyone sustainably. Lucy learned to say, "My prices reflect the quality of the teaching I offer, and this also allows me to reserve a few spots for scholarship students who truly need support," transforming her practice into a sustainable model of business and solidarity. During Lucy's transformation process, we implemented the creation of income streams suitable for people over 45, focusing on opportunities that leverage accumulated experience, such as specialized classes for adults, weekend workshops, and the development of her own teaching methods that could be licensed to other teachers. Lucy discovered that her 3 decades of experience teaching piano was a valuable asset that was being wasted when she positioned herself merely as a cheap teacher, but which became extremely valued when she positioned herself as an expert in music education. The climactic moment in Lucy's transformation came when she faced resistance from some parents who tried to make her feel guilty about the new prices, using manipulative phrases like, "You've changed. You used to care about the children. Now you only think about money. What a disappointment. I thought you were different." I had prepared Lucy for this moment, teaching her the response that would completely change her life. I care so much about these children's music education that I want to ensure I can offer the best possible teaching in a sustainable way, and that's only possible when my work is properly valued. Lucy discovered that the parents who truly valued their children's education respected her position, while those who just wanted to take advantage of her kindness sought other options. The visual analogy I use to explain this transformation is the image of a well that never runs dry, to represent a sustainable source of income, versus a leaky bucket that represents giving without limits. When you establish fair prices and sacred boundaries, you become like an artesian well that provides pure water continuously, because it is connected to a deep, inexhaustible source. When you give without limits and charge less than your worth, you become like a leaky bucket that needs to be constantly refilled by external sources, and eventually leaves everyone thirsty. Daniel applied this same wisdom in his accounting business, discovering that by establishing clear contracts, specific deadlines, and fair values, he not only improved his financial situation, but also began to attract higher quality clients who value expertise and pay appropriately for it. Daniel created 3 levels of service: a basic level for small businesses, an intermediate level for growing companies, and a premium level for clients needing strategic consulting, allowing him to serve different client profiles without compromising his prosperity. The monthly ritual I implemented with all of them involves placing an envelope marked "My Prosperity" alongside the envelope for tzedakah, physically establishing that both are important and sacred, that personal prosperity and generosity toward others are not opposing forces, but complementary ones when applied with wisdom. Every month, Daniel, Lucy, Sharon, and Robert set aside an amount for their own prosperity and an amount for conscious donations, creating a sacred balance that honors both their responsibility to themselves and their responsibility to the community. The results of this approach have been consistent and measurable: an increased ability to save without reducing the capacity to help others, the recovery of personal dignity through the achievement of financial independence, a significant reduction in money-related stress because the person begins to operate from planned abundance instead of constant scarcity, and an improvement in family and social relationships because interactions cease to be based on financial dependency and start being based on choice and genuine reciprocity. But the most profound transformation I have witnessed over these years of teaching is not just in the bank account, numbers. It is in the restoration of spiritual dignity that occurs when a person understands that their prosperity is part of the divine plan, not an obstacle to it. I want to share with you now the most important part of this teaching, the one that goes beyond practical techniques and touches the essence of what it means to live with sacred abundance. When a person learns to prosper with integrity, they discover they are fulfilling a higher spiritual purpose than simply accumulating money. They are becoming a channel through which the Eternal can bless other people in a sustainable and lasting way. Sarah, a 57-year-old widow and artisan who went through this transformation 6 months ago, perfectly exemplifies what I'm explaining. For the 15 years after her husband's death, Sarah sold her handcrafted pieces for negligible prices, because art should be accessible to everyone, working more than 12 hours a day to manage to pay basic bills, developing problems in her hands due to repetitive strain, and living in constant financial anxiety despite having an extraordinary talent recognized by everyone who knew her work. Sarah was literally killing herself with work to sustain a misdirected generosity that kept her poor and prevented her from truly helping those who needed it most. Sarah's transformation began when she applied the principle I call the value of sacred time, understanding that every hour of her life has a specific value that must be respected and protected, because time is the most precious resource the Eternal grants us, and wasting it by working for inadequate rates is a form of spiritual ingratitude. Sarah learned to calculate exactly what each piece should cost, considering not only the materials, but the time invested, the expertise developed over decades, and the uniqueness of handcrafted work in an increasingly industrialized world. When Sarah implemented the new prices, following the communication techniques I developed for such situations, explaining to customers the true value behind each piece, something extraordinary happened. She discovered that there was a market willing to pay appropriately for her work, a market she had never explored because she was too busy serving people who wanted quality art at the price of mass-produced goods. Sarah began working half the hours she used to, earning 3 times as much, and still having the energy and resources to create special pieces that she donates to charitable institutions, transforming her art into a tool for simultaneous personal prosperity and social impact. The internal dialogue Sarah had to transform is the same one you are likely facing right now. How can I charge more if it means some people won't be able to buy? The answer that changed Sarah's life and can change yours too is this. When you charge appropriately for your work, you become capable of making conscious, planned donations, instead of living in a forced donation disguised as a low price. That benefits only those who want to take advantage of your kindness, not those who truly need help. Sarah now sets aside 2 pieces a month for donation to a nursing home, something she could never do when she sold everything cheaply to anyone. The final exercise I apply with all my students is what I call the prosperous gratitude protocol, where the person learns to give thanks daily not only for what they have, but for what they are building, for the right to prosper, for the ability to generate value for others through their work, and for the opportunity to be a lasting blessing in the world. This protocol includes 3 daily affirmations to be repeated with conviction. My prosperity honors the gifts the Eternal has given me. Through my abundance, I can serve others with excellence, and I deserve to prosper so that my light can shine more brightly in the world. During this transformation process, people often ask me, Rabbi, but how can I be sure I'm not being selfish? My answer is always the same. Look at the results. A selfish person uses their prosperity only for personal consumption and isolates themselves from others. A person who prospers with Jewish wisdom uses their abundance to elevate the quality of life for everyone around them, starting with themselves and expanding in concentric circles. When you are prosperous and balanced, you offer quality jobs, you pay taxes that fund public services, you make conscious and planned donations, and you become an inspiring example that it is possible to live with integrity and abundance simultaneously. The spiritual inheritance technique I teach people in your age group focuses on understanding that the greatest legacy we can leave for the next generations is not money, but the example of how to build prosperity with dignity, how to establish sacred boundaries, and how to be generous in an intelligent and sustainable way. When your children or grandchildren see you prospering after years of financial difficulty, they learn that it is never too late to transform one's situation, that kindness and prosperity are not incompatible, and that there is a wise way to navigate between helping others and taking care of oneself. I want you to understand something fundamental. The transformation I am proposing is not about becoming a different person. It is about becoming the best version of who you already are. Your qualities of generosity, care for others, and desire to make a difference in the world are precious and must be preserved. What we are adjusting is only the method through which you express these qualities, moving from an approach that drains your resources to an approach that multiplies your capacity for positive impact. The last principle I want to leave with you is the concept of responsible abundance, which means that every time you receive money, a part is allocated to your personal needs, a part is allocated to building reserves and investments, and a part is allocated to conscious and planned tzedakah. This division is not just a financial technique. It is a spiritual ritual that acknowledges that money is a sacred tool to be handled with respect, purpose, and wisdom. I want you to write now, at this very moment, a letter to yourself a year from now, describing what your life will be like when you have implemented these principles, how you will feel when you have recovered your financial dignity, what kind of help you will be able to offer others when you are operating from abundance instead of scarcity, and what example you will be setting for those who look to you as a reference. Write this letter with detail, with emotion, as if it were a prophecy you are creating through your conscious intention. Repeat with me this prayer that concludes our teaching. May the Eternal grant me the wisdom to distinguish between sacred generosity and destructive self-sacrifice, the courage to establish the boundaries that preserve my ability to serve, and the vision to understand that my prosperity is an instrument through which I can be a lasting blessing in the world. May my cup always be full, so that the overflow can nourish many plants, and may I be prosperous not for my personal glory, but so that through my abundance, the divine light may shine more brightly in this world. Amen. May your journey from this day forward be marked by the building of a prosperity that honors both your personal dignity and your spiritual responsibility. And may you discover that being truly prosperous is the greatest act of love you can offer, not only to yourself, but to all those who will benefit from your stability, wisdom, and expanded capacity to do good in the world.